Do you have a registration sheet? Yes. Do you need it printed? No. I hope everybody doesn't just show up right at 9. Yeah, me too. when we're trying to go. Although I really hope they don't show up before 9 though either. Hey, Dorita, in that first bathroom, it looks like the soap dispenser fell off the wall overnight. Oh. There was like a big puddle of soap. I did my best to clean it up, but it still might be a little. Okay. Thank you for fix that.
Now you should get it. Okay, cool. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, check,
But
check.
headphones in there.
Okay, so now you're on the broadcast and you're in the room. Check. 1, 2. Check. 1, 2. 1, 2. Check. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
you're presenting, we're actually going to put the podium there because you're presenting. What time are you? With the camera to look at you.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great.
Should be fine.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what technology are they using?
They're using their live stream stuff. They've got a great setup for their church. So we just use that. The only issue here is there's like a 2 or 3 second delay. Bad.
So what's the agenda again? I'm so sorry.
I don't know. I don't think I have it on me. Let me see.
How about I have it?
We'll find it. At 9, let's see. I know, I posted it. That'll be the easiest way of finding it. Is it that? Oh, that's awesome findings. I don't know if awesome findings. Let's just.
Yeah.
And usually Michael Leslie's here, and we're working both of them at the same time, and he goes back out. So I might be running a little bit, but okay. So it is. And I'll copy it from here, and that way I'll have it available. Boy, I have slow connectivity right now, though. I think because we're streaming so much.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's probably not going to work out. And so we'll hear their audio through our
Yes.
speakers here.
Yeah.
Great.
Wow, it's painful. Jeez. Now I could, it's tempting. Could just stream that on its own cellular network too. If I need to, I will.
I'm just going to this up. So how are you doing?
So good.
Good? Did you have a good night last night?
I did. Got all
Okay.
but one paper
Here it
done.
is, 9 to 10, open
thank you.
interactive conversation between churches. 10 to noon is the first workshop.
Yeah.
And then lunch. So this is just fellowship time.
Yep.
Okay, great. And then from noon to 1.
Yeah, kind of directed fellowship time.
And
though.
then 1 to 2, interim moderator listening post. And then a break, and then revitalization. Okay, great.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I knew it was in my email. I just had to do a search. But then once you open your email, you get terribly distracted.
You do that too? Awesome.
Squirrel! Bring on the fish oil. Mellows you out. Hi, I'm Rochelle.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Great book.
Oh, thank you very much. I thought this was a friend of mine. I've read it a couple of times, and I keep being drawn back to it because there are a lot of wonderful ideas the authors bring out here, and it gets me thinking.
Right. At the beginning of it, it sort of says that.
Yes.
The way she does the
Yes.
baby reading. I like that. Anyway,
Well, actually, I live in Carmine. I'm a member with Presbyterian Church, Valley Ministries in Stockton now. And I've been with them since they now. In fact, Gary and Justin and I stopped in for breakfast on the way in, and I was home in my office to see if we were close to 4 years ago. I started with that.
we were 3 to 10. Sure.
Oh. And this is around the time I first came out with Sacramento with my folks, and everything was happening so quickly. And that's give or take.
Wow, yeah.
So, but I was with MC. I've been supporting MCC in various ways for that entire time. I've only actually been a member for a certain amount, certain percentage of that time. There was the time there from about 1994 when the church moved from Oak Park and up to Mather that I left, and I went to a Methodist church over in East Sacramento. It's now the Table at Central United Methodist. It was Central United Methodist at the time because a friend of mine started attending there, and he invited me to go with him from the Southers and Lives. And I really, the experience that I had with that particular church was awesome. They were open and affirming congregation, so they knew I was gay, they knew my friend Don was gay, and they invited us in. But I really felt there came a time in my own growth where I had to make a decision about whether or not I wanted to continue that church.
how do you govern your,
Oh, no.
how do you govern your staff when there's an elder who needs to be visited? Or,
Right, so it comes to questions to try to do the programs.
then you can go to
And if it's the moderator. Now, in that, you're gonna have two things.
Did you get her? All's good? Yes?
Yeah, I think so, and I'm texting her from my phone, so she has it.
And then, join a meeting. You see who's here? Oh, not yet. Keep looking. Keep looking. No, keep looking for who's going to come in the door now.
Looking,
Yeah, for who's coming in the door now.
Karen and Liz?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I just noticed. So that's okay. I'll sign up for the pro version. It's all good, and we'll have it. We'll be fine. That's yeah.
If you want to get some coffee or take a seat, there's plenty of seats down front. You are not on camera down front, except the back of your heads, which all look beautiful today, by the way. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes. So welcome to our 2017 network gathering for the Western U.S. There's 17 churches in this network. I'm Jude Litzenberger. I'm your co-leader for the southern part of the network. Sharon Henry, who you'll meet on video later, is our co-leader for northern, and that goes all the way up to Washington, Oregon right now. So welcome. MCC LA, now called Founders, is a wonderful host. This is the third time we've had this broadcast system here, and we're doing a little bit of changing because some of the people changed. Like, I am the person that does that now, and that this is all new to me. Sharon on the other end, because somebody threw their back out, is doing the same thing. So I really appreciate your patience with us today. I want to introduce our host pastor, Reverend Kevin Downer, who's going to welcome us, open us in prayer, and tell you a little bit about the guidelines for sanctuary use.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. It's absolutely a joy for us to be hosting. I would ask anybody who is a member of Founders Metropolitan Community Church, if you just raise your hand. So everybody else, if you have any questions about what you need today, the people who have their hands up, they're the ones to ask. So we are absolutely delighted to be your hosts. Just a couple of logistics for you to know. There are 2 small bathrooms. If you head to the narthex and then either go right into the usher's closet around the corner or up the stairs, the first 3 stairs, you'll find that there are 2 small bathrooms there. There are also 2 larger bathrooms in the courtyard. And then if all of that's occupied, around the corner and through the side door downstairs, we have full ADA compliant bathrooms down there. When we break for lunch, we're going to go through the front doors and around the corner and downstairs to our fellowship hall. Lunch is going to be provided. It's $10 at the door. It's going to be chicken, and it's a Mexican feast, so we're actually going to have a wonderful celebration down there. There is vegetarian options for those who need it. We do ask, as you are in the sanctuary, just to be conscious about your drinks, your cups, your foods, so that we try to keep the sanctuary clean, and we're kind of observing the law of the forest. So what you bring in, we ask that you take out. With that, I'm just, Don has already talked about parking, but just kind of reiterate, if you're parked on Prospect, it is a 1-hour parking limit, so you'll want to move your car. There is plenty of street parking up on the side streets that do not have the same restriction. Do take care to make sure that you notice whatever the signs are saying, but for the most part, you don't want to be on Prospect, which is the street that runs right in front of the church. With that, let us open in prayer. Creator God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for gathering us together on this very important day, for reminding us that your call is the call to continue vitalization and revitalization. We ask that you bless us in our time together, that you bless everybody who's gathering here and in Sacramento, who's watching online, that you be with us, that we feel your spirit, and that we are moved by this movement that you got started nearly 48 years ago. We ask that you continue to bless us, that you bless our moderator, that you bless the governing board, that you bless all of the members, the boards, the pastors of all of these many churches, that we may continue to be your shining light, your new movement, inspired to be who you need us to be at this most critical time in our community, our city, and in our world. Amen.
So the way we start all of these is by getting to know each other. So what we're asking is that each church have folks come up, say your name, what church you're from, and then let's talk about some successes and some challenges that you've experienced in ministry since our last network gathering, which is about 1.5 years ago. So I know that there's people dying to talk, so come on up. Who wants to start? Come on up, Marie. Thank you. You need the microphone because we're broadcasting. So the places you want to stand is right in front of this music stand.
Alrighty then. Can everybody see me? Can you hear me now? My name is Marie Tasker, and I'm from MCC Las Vegas. And we have an amazing church there. One of our successes, which I am just so excited about, is the fact that we have a new pastor. And he'll actually be celebrating his 1-year anniversary really soon, so I want everybody to cheer for that. And so just like every other church, we have ebbs and flows, and our longtime volunteer music director recently retired. And so that's one of our challenges as we welcome in a new music director and learn what that's going to be for our church. So that's our biggest challenge right now, because all of you know how important music is to a church. And so we're looking at making things different, experiencing change, and welcoming it. Would you add anything? All right. Come on.
I'm Reverend Robert Fleming, and I am the new, not so new, senior pastor at Metropolitan Community Church of Las Vegas. And so very excited to be there. It was a great move for my family and I. And I would say, yes, definitely the challenge is the new music minister, because we have never paid for a music minister. And now we're in that process of trying to bring someone on that is a cost to us, that the congregation has no idea what the music minister does or the worship arts person does. And so that is a challenge for us, but we've had lots of successes. We've got back involved with Pride. We're able to lead the worship service that weekend. And so making connections within the community. And so I'm excited to be here because this is my first time with this network. And so to get to know and learn and meet new people.
So one more success, because of course I have to keep talking, Jude. Sorry. You gave me the mic. Is that we now have a very successful children's ministry. And we're very excited. We have people that regularly teach. It's not the same people. And so we're very excited about children who are our future. So who's next? Come on. Come on. All right, come on down. Sorry, Jude, I took over.
I appreciate it.
It's kind of nice to be told, come on down. I'm Dean Coffey. I'm on the board. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Director. I'm Dean Coffey. I'm on the board here at MCC LA, Founders MCC LA. And our church is going through a period of transition. We have our interim pastor, who we're grateful for his ministry here, and a visions and values team that have had multiple conversations about what are our values, and also taking an honest look at ourselves and the things that we need to change about ourselves. And we're coming through that. It's more of a process rather than coming to a definite conclusion. But we're moving forward, and our pastoral search team is getting close to soliciting applications, and we're really hoping to identify a candidate for this summer to come and preach with us. Apart from that, I think it's surprised everybody in the congregation. At Easter, we had 165 in attendance here, and this place was packed, baptized 3 kids, and then had a nice Easter egg hunt after the baptism. The little girl in the white baptismal dress, her parents had a big job keeping the chocolate off of the dress. Good things are happening here. We've secured parking in coordination with Children's Hospital Los Angeles. We're thankful for them sharing a lot with us on Sundays. And we've rehabbed the apartment that's up above our preschool back here and hired a new custodial facilities manager. So things are moving forward. It's never as fast as we want it to move, but Reverend Kevin always reminds us it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's what's happening here. And we're really happy to have every single one of you here with us to share and to energize all of our ministries together.
Thanks. Just one other thing that I'm really, really proud of oh, sorry. I should know better. So just one of the other things that I really want to highlight that I'm really proud of this congregation about. 2 weeks ago, we held our spring congregational meeting. And during that spring congregational meeting, unanimously, the congregation passed 2 resolutions that relate to sanctuary and the sanctuary movement. The first commits us as individuals to how we will actually interact with people who may or may not be documented or may be immigrants. The second resolution commits the congregation on a path to forming a task force to explore how we commit to the sanctuary movement as a congregation. And so I'm just really, really excited about the commitment that the congregation has made to that process and to stand for justice. So I have to give props to the congregation for that.
So if you are driving a gray Honda Fit and you had the audacity to park it behind those other 2 cars in the driveway, you need to move it. Okay, please. Nobody here? Good. Do you want to just toss your keys? Maybe. Okay, Don will take care of it for you. Thank you. All right. Who's next success? Yes, come on up. Mr. Sutherland.
Hello, some of you may know me. I'm Michael, and I'm with Resurrection Beach, MCC in Costa Mesa. And we're a small but mighty church. We're involved in a lot of ministries with the homeless in Orange County. One of our members, Carmen Abadoka, and her wife have a ministry feeding the homeless that our church supports, and a couple of, was it last weekend? Last weekend they fed 2,000 people. Yeah, and so that is our primary calling. We also have a queer cultural center. It's an outlet that attracts other folks who might not be aware of MCC and it's a way, it's a non-religious way to introduce them to potential involvement in Resurrection Beach. We also have a council of ministries that, because we don't have a pastor at the moment and haven't for some time, that really directs the vision of the church. And they're very involved in all of these things, and it's been quite a success. So I'm glad to be here today.
Who's next? Come on, Ken.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Ken Theriault with MCC of the Coachella Valley, which is Palm Springs. Greater Palm Springs is actually in Cathedral City. I am the lay delegate for that church, and I am also the music director there. It is a volunteer position, although from time to time they cut me a small honorarium, I think it's called, which I'm very grateful for. So I want to talk about the success of our music program. I think my colleagues from CV will also have things to talk about as well. But I am in my 9th year directing that church choir and have gone through 3 or 4 accompanists. We've experienced some death and dying in our music program, and including who I would describe as the founding musician for that church, Harris Jameson. Not a Sunday goes by when we don't remember him and think of him. And then a year ago, Palm Sunday, our then pianist, accompanist, passed away that Palm Sunday morning. I can remember Clinton coming into the fellowship hall where we rehearsed, and I saw the look on his face, and I said, "Ron?" And he said, "Yeah." So that's been hard as a music director to, you work very closely with your accompanists. They are the heart and soul of what you're able to do with the singers. So that's been hard. Blessings, though. We've been praying for women to come along and join our choir, female voices, and we've had 2 or 3 who've been faithful throughout that time period. But I've never had a soprano in the choir, and now I do have a soprano in the choir. And we're real excited about that. Her name is Patty Dean. And her wife, Carol, is a retired organist, and so she's been at the keyboard now for a while, and she's just amazing. She knows how to work that Rogers organ and make it sing. There's a synthesizer that's attached to it, and she can bring out the violins and the clarinets, and it's just a wonderful sound. I think the congregation's really loving that. The choir itself has breathed, gotten bigger and gotten smaller. Right now, I think we're about 14 or 15 voices, 3 women and the rest guys. But they're all really there because they want to be there. I'm not pulling anybody's teeth to get them there. And they rehearse at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning before the service for 90 minutes. And we don't have a midweek rehearsal. We're looking at that again as a possibility. But we get it all done in the one day. And I think it contributes a lot to the service. We do a variety of styles of music to try to create some diversity in the worship service through music. Challenges, the consistency of an accompanist is a challenge for me. Finding more women to sing in the choir is a challenge. We don't have lots of women in the congregation to start with, but some. And in Palm Springs, there's the Palm Springs Gay Men's Chorus. There is, what's the other one called? Modern Men, the Coachella Valley Men's Chorus. There's lots of men who are singing in these groups, but there aren't comparable women's groups to draw from. So I need to figure out ways to draw more women into the music program. We had a handbell choir for a while, but one of the musicians who died was directing that, and we used the bells for the last time at his memorial service going on 3 years ago. And occasionally we just do a couple of bells to highlight something, but I would love to get that handbell choir back up and running somehow without using 8 people from the voice choir who are also in the bell choir. Because then you burn people out doing that. But it's a beautiful sound, and I'd really like to have that happen again. I think that's about it on the music program.
Yeah, I'll stand in front of the podium. Reverend Clinton Crawshaw, I'm the senior pastor at MCC of the Coachella Valley. And I'm trying to spread it around a little so, you're not just listening to me droning on. The church has really found a place of stability and strength in the last couple of years. And we had a worrying time, what with me on the governing board, up until last year. And also the deaths. We had a period of probably 2 years where there was intense quantity of death. We lost nearly 40% of the giving base in that period because there were some very generous members who passed away. But more importantly, they were long-standing members and much beloved people, and we went through a communal grieving process. But interacting with that fully and properly had a short-term effect of, people will walk in and they say, oh, it's all about death, But in the medium to long term, it deepened the roots of the congregation with their faith and with one another substantially. One of my big successes, the church's big successes in the last couple of years has probably been midweek involvement. And it's pushed up the overall attendance of the church so that we ensure that it's well above 100 every week. It's usually about 120 weekly. And yet in the Sunday service, it kind of goes between 65 60 on high summer to perhaps 75, 85 during the winter. So a lot of people are now coming midweek. We have a Thursday Taizé service, which I'd initially, I wanted because an intimate service was important for me when I first started coming into the faith. We had midweek mass in my tradition, and it was me, an elderly lady, her dog, and the priest in a side chapel. And for me, that was a wonderful experience. It was very different to coming to a big Sunday service. And so the Taizé service is in part to help out with that. I think we had about 8 on Thursday when we were there. And it's usually hovering somewhere around that. On Wednesdays, there's a midweek social, which has got a dedicated following, dozen, 15, 20 people on a really big week. And that's free, and it's called Tea and Sympathy, or the midweek social. And it's just tea with proper china. And thankfully, we're blessed with lots of retired people who are invaluable. I understand everyone need to get young people in the church, but my goodness, when it comes to running a church, retired people are godsends. Godsends. And also, it happens to coincide with a time in people's lives where very frequently they're starting to think deeply about faith. And therefore, ministry towards the elder community is just vital. So we've got all these retired people who carry with them skills, and thankfully one of those skills is cooking. And if you want people to turn up to something, cook. Get people providing food. So the Wednesday, we have a soup and hot topics do, which is, about 20 people came to it last Wednesday, and it was on the Jehovah's Witnesses. So during the course, we've had an interfaith series, which has been very popular. We're doing Mormonism next week. So if anyone's in the Coachella Valley, you can come and do Mormonism. And there'll be 2 homemade soups as well, so you can come and have some of that. We have a first female deacon coming on board. Her ordination is at Pentecost. I'm looking forward to that. We have 3 deacons. And our senior deacon pretty much does all the jobs I should be doing better, and allows me to look very, very good indeed. So those deacons are just vital. And I think that's about it. Attendance is good, finance is good, but I'll let the treasurer say a little more about finances because he's a magician. So thank you.
You realize, of course, we're hogging the podium, but Gene Metzger, member of the board of directors and finance guy for MCC-CV. I'm one of the old retired people who have found the church, and it keeps me off the streets. But it's absolutely amazing that we have been able to go through. It has nothing to do with myself. It has everything to do with the generosity of the members and friends of MCC-CV. It does help, though, if you know how to put the money in what bucket and whatever, and also to say no when that needs to be said. But the good news is that we've gone from deficit spending, where we had a bit of a leftover when the congregation purchased the property, but that soon dissipated because every time the spending exceeded the budget, it went to, we drew from what was a reserve fund. So anyway, that stopped, and that fund now is substantial. I mean, for us, it's substantial. It's $28,000. And we continue to live accordingly. But aside from that, we cannot get away from the fact that you do need bricks and mortar. You really, really do. One of the things that breaks my heart is the fact that this denomination has such a rich tradition. And you can see it up on the back wall there on some of these pictures that depict the early roots of MCC. And it's a shame that, as Clinton would say, that MCC has almost become an apostrophe at at the end of it as a political movement, and it's not. And it's not. So from the glasses that I wear, it's extremely important that we have an open and welcoming brick and mortar structure, even though you hear constantly on Sundays, it's you are the church, not this building, but boy, you need the building. And along with all the other things that come with it, the repairs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We just had a $5,000 weekend writing checks, and I tell you, I'm still a bit chafed. But so, in any event, we're on the right footing. We're postured for growth. Admittedly, Palm Springs has an age demographic of which I'm quite representative of, and as Clinton, which is rather comforting, is that as we are these years, it's terribly important that we are ministered to as we get closer to learning more about what's to come. So in any event, we had a successful, the only thing that I'll say is we did have a successful, you've probably all heard of a thing called the angel tree. And what that basically is that come the holidays, the Christmas holidays, you put up a Christmas tree and there are little tags on there. And for most of the time it says, well, will you buy Mary Jo a beanbag or something, or a Barbie doll and whatever. And so we started for a while, the last several years, to, don't want this to sound wrong, but charity beginning at home. And so we put some things up there on the angel tree, such as a carton of paper for the office, stamps. Would you like to pay the trash bill 1 month? It's $57. Things like this. The response was overwhelming. The first year we had $13,000 from the angel tree, and we continue in the double-digit numbers. And it has not affected the other collections. So, because usually you get people, okay, so you take from this pocket to this pocket, you wind up with the same amount of money, but that's not been the case. We have some new members. We are growing, albeit slowly. And of course, the truth of the matter is, we have some deaths. And we bring in some more people who will be dying shortly. And so anyway, this is where we are at. Come to Palm Springs. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
So 1 or 2 more churches haven't shared. Do you want to share? Come on down. And then we're going to switch to a church for all in Sacramento as soon as Dan is done. Dan and Beth are done. Oh, no, you can do one too? Same church?
This is the finishing act of the MCC-CV. I am the middle deacon, so I have middle issues. I'm also one of the cooks. I wear a couple of different hats at the church. One is deacon. I'm head of hospitality, so when you come to our church, I feed you well. And if I don't feed you well, don't pass that around. Just bring it to me, and I'll fix it. Second, I am the token transgender person. I know that there are transgender people in Palm Springs in the cathedral area, but they're reluctant to come to church because they've been treated the worst. I can attest to that. So I've been in the fellowship since '72. It started with Troy when I was a kid, and I'm also an aging retired person. So I welcome you to come to Cathedral City anytime.
Hello, Pastor Dan from MCC in San Diego, and we'll start with our challenges. Many of you know Reverend Caedmon Grace who used to be on staff here at this church in Founders, was in a motorcycle accident March 20th. We remember the day, and I was actually got a phone call from a Goodwill Samaritan that actually picked up his phone and said, he's on the side of the road, the ambulance is here right now, and I was able to make it before they took him to the hospital, and just to be able to say, we're here for you. And long story short, he is doing excellent, he is recovering well. However, he is in Bakersfield and he employed in San Diego, and so we've been having a hard time just feeling his absence. And so thank God for technology right now, and he is now working 20 hours a week remotely, and so we have him connected to our computer system so he can just go right into the network and even be able to print for us in the office things that he's working on so that we can, do the proofreading and getting ready. In fact, he did the Sunday Bulletin. So I saw him on Friday when he was in San Diego for doctor's appointments. So that is a challenge and also a praise that he is doing well. And so we continue to lift him up in prayer. And thank you for everybody who has been so good in encouraging and praying for him. Success. It's a real simple one that we finally decided to do because we see churches like this church doing these broadcasts and, what a difference to be able to reach out to people when they can't make it to church for whatever reason. And so we just decided, well, we're going to just go to the latest technology we have that works for us, that we can afford. And that is taking an iPhone and live streaming on Facebook. And it works just so great for us. And we've been having so many people watching the services. And as a matter of fact, this last Sunday, or this week, it's going to be in the bulletin for the first time, we are using the attendance from the live stream attendance, the people that were actually there for the service, and Reverend Caveman is monitoring that, and we're going to add that to our attendance, which is a fabulous thing, so that people can feel like they're part. Now the next part is, now how can you continue to give while you are watching that? And so it's a learning process, but I would call that a success. And then also, we are, with the Reverend Tony and the Office of Church Leadership Development, are doing, we're a prototype, or we're a test pilot church for Leading with Love leadership program that Reverend Tony has produced over 10 years ago and is now bringing that back into the denomination and ways that it can be equally and easily adapted to your church. And so talk to Tony about that, and we are on our third session coming up in June, and we've got 23 people that are going through that, and so it's just a really good thing, and I'm grateful for Tony doing that, and also just to be able to be the pastor in San Diego. Beth.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Beth, lay delegate for our church. And I think I want to start with a challenge too, and one of them is one of our outreach ministries is a jail ministry. And late last year, the county jail in San Diego put the transgender population back into the general population of the facility. And so it's become very difficult for us to reach out to LGBT people in the jail to come to our church services that we hold twice a month. We don't really understand why that is, and we're working with the Sheriff's Department to try and figure out why people feel intimidated to come. So we ask for your prayer as we're moving forward with that. And that started me thinking about a connection I have with the California Department of Corrections and the state prison system, that they have a big need for church outreach for LGBT people. So I'm thinking maybe this is a shove, to explore expansion of this program. And so that's a personal goal for me, is to work on that by the end of this year. And then another success I wanted to share is something Cademan got launched at the beginning of the year, and that's really a programming series that he's called Ignite. And it starts with figuring out what your spiritual location is and how you can engage yourself spiritually and engage with others that have similar locations. And it's been a huge success. It's brought a whole lot of new people to the church. Well, not a whole lot, probably, 8 or 10 maybe. That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot, yeah. So that's been really a huge success. And then lastly, I just want to share our trans affinity group, I'll call it, is celebrating its 3rd year anniversary this month. So, thank you.
All right, we're going to go to a Church for All in Sacramento at this point. Dave, are we ready to go to them? All right, let's go. Walk kind of uphill all the time in that church.
And then last, I just want to share our trans celebrating with you this month. So, thank you.
We're going to go to a church in Sacramento at this point. Dave, are we ready to go to them? All right, let's go.
That's right. Hi, everybody here and everybody in LA. Terry Miller from
Kind of uphill all the time.
from Valley Ministries, MCC. We're doing fairly well. We're working with migrant workers. We recently finished a grant program with a youth pilot, working with youth, and we have a couple of people that were on it here. Our lay delegate had a funeral today, so she's not here. And we too have had struggles, just like I've heard some of you have had struggles. Essentially, our board recently did a risk management and reviewed all of our insurance and reviewed all of those types of things, and we financed our mortgage, so we're 4 years away from owning our own building, which is great, brick and mortar. Batteries is... Hold up.
Yeah, there's frozen. Audio's good, but we're frozen.
Okay, well, we're good.
So
Keep going. That's good.
that's good. Well, thanks, Reverend Terry. And now we'll go to update from MCC of the Redwood Empire. Who's volunteering? Who's Reverend Scotty or Ken?
I'm Ken Johnson, the lay delegate, MCC Redwood Empire. We've had a challenging year, but some really good things have happened. We called Norma Gann as our senior pastor. She started on June 1st, and it's really been interesting. We have a Texan among us, Northern California, so some challenges there. Overall, really happy to have her and her wife Catherine. They're wonderful people. We have continued with many of our annual ministries, such as our backpack drive for kids in the fall. We bags for unhoused people in the community. We do this wonderful jail Christmas concert in 2 of the jails in Sonoma County. We've continued with our Thanksgiving food box giveaway, which helped feed about 10 families in the community. I've been managing the food pantry for the last 6 years, which is the pantry. We feed 50 to 100 people a month with that. We have been struggling with low attendance, really having anywhere from 10 to 15 people every Sunday. So in response to that, Norma has incorporated just some more social things. Reverend Gann, excuse me, to just kind of create more morale and excitement, bringing people in. We have a big booth at Pride in Grenville, and we're going to have a fundraiser, so we're all excited about that. So be a fun summer, and we're looking forward to having visitors and increase their membership.
Excellent. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to talk to Liz, who's representing Main MCC in San Mateo.
Hi, everyone. Liz here, representing, like she said, the San Mateo Church, which was previously known as the Peninsula MCC, has gone through a name change. It's now Many Journeys, and that is definitely helping them out because of some unfortunate bad publicity from the past. So name change was needed, and also kind of opens it up, not geographically based, which is great for people that, because we're pulling people from the Bay Area plus clear down into the Central Valley, into Sacramento and beyond, which is great that it opens up that ownership and feel of community. Also changes that the church is doing is technology, getting away from the standard bulletin and using overhead with some great inspirational slides that are integrated into it. And of course, like everybody else, fundraisers, doing a new one today, wine this afternoon, getting away from the dinner and dance and trying something new and exciting for people. And outreach, continuing to support the migrant workers of Punta. Yeah. Yeah. In Valley over off the coast there, at Christmas time, supporting the men with socks and toiletries, school supplies twice a year for kids. And so it's really continuing the outreach and working the city of San Mateo as far as pride issues, LGBT rights and stuff in that area.
All right, great. Thanks, Liz. Now from Reflection MCC in Folsom, California, we have Charlene. So give us an update of our new church in Folsom.
That's right. We are a brand new MCC church that started in October of 2018. We are blessed with Pastor Sharon Henry and her wife. And
Sorry, now we're really running into issues because we have.
No, we're good. Okay. Sorry, Charlene.
Commercial. Anyway,
That was a commercial break. Welcome back to our show. Again, this is Charlene, representing Reflection MCC in Folsom, California. No, you're fine.
Anyway, we technically don't yet, but we do have between 16 and 25 people. We meet twice monthly at a hotel in Folsom, California. But we are looking to get enough members to on the church, and we will shortly because we're tiny but we're mighty, and we will get there.
Right. Hey, great. Thanks so much, Charlene. And from A Church for All, we have Reverend Doretha.
Hi, welcome to A Church for All. My name is Doretha Williams Flournoy, and I am the senior pastor here at A Church for All. And what are we doing? Lots. We have just moved into this space in August. So this is the first time that we have been in our own space where we have been the primary occupant, and are having a great time kind of figuring all of that out and what it's like to now pay, utilities and taxes and all of that kind of stuff. We also have a mental health respite program that is funded by the County of Sacramento, and it runs Sunday through Friday from about 1 to 6, and we provide crisis management services to people living with mental health challenges or people who are experiencing or at risk of a mental health crisis. And so it's called the Ripple Effect, and it is a peer-run program, and it provides case management, counseling, referrals, and some remuneration for a variety of different kinds of crises, education, and things of that nature. And so we are grateful to be in our 11th year of service.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. We just had our birthday last month, and so we are happy to be here.
All right, great.
Welcome.
Thanks so much, Reverend Doretha.
Has it been passed back to us, Dave? Okay, let's go. So we're ready to broadcast from here?
Guess I should unmute.
Okay. Well, first of all, give yourselves a hand. At both ends of these conversations are people that were very brave to talk about the challenges that they are facing. And go talk to those folks. If you have any ideas on things that are helping, something that's working in your church that they may be able to learn from or use, or that's what networks are all about. So we are in this together. And for those of you that are extremely successful in all of those things, we know that all ministries have a life cycle. So be aware that some days it may be really high in a particular ministry, and sometimes it may become a challenge for you. So we all work this together, and I really appreciate everybody who shared. Thanks very much. And there were a couple people who didn't get to share. We'll try to fit you in right after lunch and or after Raquel's presentation in the afternoon. We'll figure it out, okay? We'll get that done. So it's my pleasure to introduce a young man who I've met when he was my pastor way back, and I won't even tell you, a long time ago. Tony Freeman has been through it all in MCC and really is a gift to all of us. Tony now is the elder in charge of the Office of Church Life and Health. Networks come under the Office of Church Life and Health, so he is my resourcer and my mentor in a lot of ways, and a wonderful resource to you. Today he's going to do a presentation called Revitalization. You will find things in there that'll just be amazing to you, and you'll go back on fire to your church. That's my gift to you. And the reason I say that is because every time I hear him, that's what happens. So I'm going to stop talking and introduce my pastor and my mentor and my boss, Reverend Elder Tony Freeman.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to use that. Wow. Well, that was, I feel that's hard to live up to. We okay with sound on this one? Yeah? Yeah? We're good? Okay. Well, can everybody see me all right up here? Yeah? I know. That's why I was checking, just to make sure you could see me all right. Well, I want to just first take a moment and express my gratitude to the host churches in both locations, and to, of course, to Church for Me and for Founders MCC for their hospitality. So can we give them a big hand? And thank you. Thank you so much. Also want to express my appreciation to all of the network leaders and network teams and all of the volunteers that have helped put on this gathering. So thank you all for your time, your talent, and sharing. We really, really appreciate all of your hard work. Well, I'm grateful to be able to do this presentation about revitalization. And I just want to start by saying that revitalization is not just for the churches that are experiencing serious challenges. In today's world, we always have to be learning, we always have to be renewing and looking ahead. So I think that that's a really important piece of it. I also want to say that let me get this here, is that when there are so many challenges in the world today. I mean, everywhere you look, it seems like every day we're confronted with something new, doesn't it? And so has there ever been a time where we've needed progressive voices for compassion and justice in the world than we do right now? And I think it's so wonderful to hear about all of the wonderful things that you all have been doing and the ways that you've been helping to transform lives and transform the world. But not just today, now, more than ever, but we're going to need it 20 years from now too, right? I mean, it's not like I got a crystal ball that it's all going to, but I don't think it's all going to go away. And so I think that, if we're going to really be able to transform the world and our movement's going to continue, the only way that happens is by having vibrant churches. MCC as a denomination is only as strong as our local churches. And if we're going to transform the world, it will be through our local congregations. And so how can we continue to be vibrant? How can we continue to grow in terms of our impact in the world about bringing about justice and compassion everywhere? Most of us, I hear so many of our congregations talking about we're getting older. And in some places, there's a replenishment of that because more and more people will retire in Palm Springs. But that's not the same in other areas. So that goes back to the importance of context as we talk about these things. So vitality. So what are we talking about when we're talking about vibrant churches? And so vitality, one thing I will say about vitality is when we talk about vital churches and vitality, there's nothing in there about church size, right? You can be a vibrant church no matter what size you are. And it's interesting that, there's all kinds there's been tons of books written about what are the markers of a vibrant congregation. And so finally, Alban Institute said, well, let's do a study. And so they got one of their senior consultants who spent over a year studying all of the authors who had researched and wrote books on markers of vibrant churches. So at the end of the study, listen to this. He came back and he said, y'all are going to be disappointed, because his job really was to, comb through all of those and just pick the top 4 or 5. And so after the year of studying of all, he came back and he said, there is none. Because no one because what it meant was it was so contextual. Now, we can think of some things that we know that around vibrant churches, right? I mean, if there's lives being transformed in the community and you're helping to transform your community in the world, then that's a vibrant church. I think that's the one that we can all agree on, right? In this next slide, which is, let me see here. No? Huh.
We've lost control of the slides.
It worked early. Well, no one can read that, so. But what it is, it's some synonyms for, it says, well, vitality is a noun, the state of being strong, active, energy. And that gives all of these wonderful synonyms for vitality. Can you think of any synonyms for vitality? Just shout them out. Enthusiasm. Yeah. Positivity. Good. Energized. Yes. So some of the other synonyms that it lists in this little box up here is liveliness, life, energy, spirit, vivacity. Exuberance, buoyancy, elan. Verve, vim. Doesn't that sound gay? Huh? It does. It's just, we're so vibrant. We're so vital. So here we are, wanting to continue to have vital congregations, to be able to really make a difference in our world, to be that progressive voice for compassion and justice in our world. And at the same time, what we're experiencing is that what often has worked in the past is not working so well today. Some things are still working and other things are not. And so what we've seen is that the current models and the models of church we have today may not be the models of what church will look like in the future. And that's very challenging for all of us, particularly those of us who have grown up with this particular model of church. But we want to be around 20 years from now too, right? Not just for today. And so what we have, though, is we know that certain things aren't working as they used to, and working harder at what you've already been doing that's not really reproducing results is not the way to go, right? We all agree on that? Yeah, that'll just burn you out. But at the same time, we're not sure exactly what the church of the future will look like. And so we call this, in a lot of ways, liminal space. It's that time between, we know things are changing, but we're not quite sure what they're changing into yet. Does that make sense? It was so interesting because I read about 5 books on, the future of the church and things like that. And in all of them, the word liminal was in there, in liminal space. And it was a word that I had hardly heard before that. And I said, someone's trying to get my attention with this liminal space stuff. But then it makes sense to me, because if we look and we think about our faith journey and our ancestors, liminal space is something that's nothing that's new to us. We called it wandering in the wilderness. That time of wilderness, wandering. And what that, and this is a little map of the wilderness wandering, which you can see here. And it's probably a little bit different than the one in the back of your Bible, than the map in the back of your Bible that shows it, which I know is on your nightstand right next to your bed, unless you have it with you. But so wilderness is nothing new for us. This liminal space, this time of being in between, of discovering something new. And part of what do we do when we're in the wilderness? You let go of, part of it was letting go of the old, right? They had to learn let go of the old ways and learn new ways of being the people of God. So I think that for us as a Christianity and as a movement, to be in the wilderness is nothing new. We're in good company, and we've been there before. And it's a place that we will get through again. And this is their map. This is the one you probably have in your Bible. But you can see that, you know what? It's not just a straight line, right? You've got to go over here. You try this out. Oops, that's not the right way. How about this? Let's try this way. Does that make sense? So, we have to be able to continue to experiment and try new things and begin to develop a whole new way of looking at what it means to be the people of God, to be the church for the 21st century. Now, one of the other things that I like to really remind people of is that when they were wandering in the wilderness, they weren't alone, were they? Because sometimes I think we're in this middle of this wandering time in this wilderness, and we wonder if God is still where's God in this? And the reality is that God is always ahead of us, right? God is always ahead of us. And so in this scripture, it just reminds us that God is with us in the day, in the night, no matter where we are on this wilderness journey, that we are not alone and that God is indeed with us. And I think that that's really, really important for us to remember as we go through these seasons. Now, can you think of a time in the life of your congregation when you felt you were in the wilderness? Huh? I'm getting a lot of laughs here and a lot of head nodding. Do any of you feel like you're in the wilderness right now? Yeah? Well, we hope we all don't have to pass away before we get to the new promised land, right? Yeah. But so this is familiar. Is it helpful to remember the stories of our ancestors and to think about them and help put that into perspective and to remind us that we as a people have been there before? And to remind us that God is indeed with us as we travel our own wilderness journeys? Okay, very good. So reminded that God was with. Now, shift happens. And if I can say shift happens 3 times without making the big mistake, it'll be a miracle. There's just been tremendous shifts in our culture. And what's really interesting is that when churches talk about their challenges, so often all they talk about is their internal challenges. And we forget that there are so many external factors that impact what's happening with us as a church. And yet, so often we're so busy doing the internal stuff that we don't get up and be able to get out on the balcony and look at the external stuff that's happening in the world that really will impact us. And sometimes I also think that MCC has felt that they're immune to the changes in the culture shifts, which is not true. We are not terminally unique. It's just not that way. And so what are some of the changes in our culture in just in the last 10, 15 years have been amazing? And to think that all of these changes don't impact us? Of course they do. My son, 21 years old, 21. He has never known a world where there wasn't an electric car. Right? He's never lived in a world where there weren't cell phones. He has learned how to swipe on a tablet, not turn the page of a magazine. That's a very different world, isn't it? What are some of the other shifts that we've had in our culture? What are some of the other ones you think of? Ability to travel. How people look at church, absolutely. People working on Sunday. Yeah, unless you work at Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A or whatever it is. Okay. Yeah. So the number of shifts in our culture are also have a huge impact on the local church. I would point out that the secularization of society. There are less and less people, as Maria pointed out, are attracted to organized religion. In the United States, 4,000 congregations, 4,000 churches in the U.S. are closing every year. Somebody do the math. How many is that each Sunday? More than one. Let me say, yeah. I'm so glad you're good at math. But and so you have 4,000 congregations closing every Sunday, and at the same time, what's happening with the population? It's going up. And then you have what's the fastest growing segment in religion today is the nuns. And that's N-O-N-E-S, not nuns with a habit, not the Sister Act nuns. The fastest growing segment is the nuns, those with no religious affiliation. And the second fastest group growing in the U.S. is the dones, those who are done with any organized religion. But important thing is the nuns and the dones not saying they're none and done with God. So what does that tell us? I think that there's a whole lot to learn. And I would challenge us to consider how How many of us were nuns or duns at one time? Huh? So I would think that we would have a step up on being able to reach and being able to connect with the nuns and the duns in new ways. Since I believe that I was a nun. I don't think I ever got to the dun part, but I was a nun. And so when you have that as your fastest growing segments of the population, and you have those number of churches closing every year, that's a pretty stark picture of what's happening with Christianity in North America, isn't it? There was an article in the Washington Post recently that said if the mainline Christianity continues on this current trajectory, mainline Protestant denominations, if they continue on their current trajectory, there's only 23 more Easters. Wow. That's enough to make you sit up and take notice, isn't it? Only 23 more Easters. Now, of course, that was the headline, and then you go down into the article a little bit further, and the author says, I doubt that this will really happen. However, if you just look at it numerically, that's where it would be. If the slope is going down like this, sooner or later it hits bottom, right? And in the same way, if our churches continue on that trajectory and we continue to age out in many of our places, where are we going to be? And so, there's all these factors that are happening out in the world, and the world is changing, and so how are we changing? Or are we? And are we willing to be able to look and to do things differently and to do things in a new way? It's a big challenge. It was interesting too in that Washington Post article where he said, the sky is not falling, but the floor is falling out from underneath us. And so if for us is how do we get ahead of this? How do we be proactive? The Methodist denomination's decline started in 1965. And they have been declining every year since 1965. Now, MCC, we fared a lot better. It was until early in 2000s that we started to see our decline in our annual worship attendance cumulative for all of our churches. But in MCC from 2008 to 2015, over a 7-year period, we dropped by 1/3 from 680,000 in annual worship attendance to 440,000. That's a significant number. That is, right? And so you can't keep doing that, right? Over a longer period of time. I do think that it does give me some hope that, ours has been much more recent and ours didn't start in 1965. And I believe that we also have the advantage of being young enough and small enough that we should be able to do things differently and turn things around. We don't have a 680-page book of polity holding us back, constraining us from being able to do things different. So any other things about, what's happening in terms of the religious landscape and the culture that you can think of that are really impacting our local churches? Yes. The distribution of wealth. Okay. Yes.
Sacramento is saying music is streamed. I would think that also includes services are streamed. Okay. More and more services are being streamed.
And isn't this just a side note here, and I'm going to get to you too real quick, is that what's happening with department stores in United States? More and more brick and mortar department stores are closing every day. I mean, you know, like the Sears, the J.C. Penney, you know, they're talking about wiping out almost half of those kind of stores. So brick and mortar stores are really struggling. And I just keep thinking to myself, there's some correlation there. There's something there too, because more people are shopping online. So if we have a shift to more and more people participating in church virtually, what does that mean for us? How do we flip that dilemma? How do we flip that dilemma? Yes. So a lot of the negative perceptions about Christianity is probably something that's contributed to the growth of the nuns and the duns. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Clinton. Right.
They just haven't kept up. Even the Roman Church in Los Angeles, for example, when I was living in Silver Lake, they haven't built any churches for the longest time. Yeah. And the places where people used to live, the churches there were serving a different congregation. Yeah. And they haven't kept up with it.
Right. So Clinton's pointing out that how demographic shifts have happened. And we've seen this in the LGBT community too, haven't we? I mean, you know, you go and you visit the Castro, and the Castro is no longer the Castro. And so, you know, we've had these shifts, whereas, you know, there were usually pockets where people of LGBT and others lived, not so much so anymore. And here our church in Denver is a prime example of that. They have a property, beautiful building right on Capitol Hill, which used to be the gay area in Denver. And now they've all moved out, and we have this big, beautiful church with no parking. So, you know, what do you do in that situation? You know, you have to really look at things differently. And part of, you know, continuing to be vibrant and to be effective in your community is understanding who your community is. And for MCC, for many of us, we have described our neighbor, our community, by demographic rather than geographic, correct? And so with these shifts, how do we now describe who is our neighbor, who is our community? Is there a shift there? But being able to define that is critical, right? And you know, you can just think about the ways that continues to change. I think that, like for a church in Denver, you know, either the choices to me seem to be either you become a neighborhood church or you sell the building and you move somewhere else to do something different that you feel called to do. But in that whole area around the Denver church, it's very densely populated with lots of young professionals. And so then how do you go out then and connect with the community around you? How do you go out and listen? Not assume what they need, but listen to their needs. That's a big difference, right? And you not only want to listen to their needs, but you want to listen to what your neighbor's gifts are. Because everyone has something they can teach somebody else, right? And how much more is it not just providing charity for their needs, but also helping them to be able to use their gifts? How empowering is that? And maybe there's other ways that people in your community can help each other, and you can be a facilitator for that. But the listening is a big key part of continuing to stay vibrant in today's world. There was a congregation in Indianapolis, a Methodist congregation, believe it or not, and they decided to do something different. They stopped all of their outreach, what they called their charitable ministries, and went out and decided they were going to hire a listener. They actually have a listener on staff. How cool is that? And the person is, their full-time job is to go out and listen to the people in the community to help understand their needs and their gifts. And what's happened is it's transformed that church, that community, because they have whole new ways of how that they are utilizing the gifts of their neighbors. And so I just think that we probably might not be able to afford a full-time listener, but how do we intentionally listen? Once we know who, these are our neighbors, this is our community, how are we listening to them, not assuming what we need they have? And the flip side of that is that so often in churches, what we say is, we have everything you need, you just need to come here, rather than us go out to them, right? Okay, so there is it's a big important piece is how are we defining who our neighbor is, and how are we learning and listening? And I think that the church that is going to continue to be vibrant in the future is the one that's going to be in that continuous process of learning. That we need to be lifelong learners. That we're taking a step back, we're taking a look around us and saying, hey, what's happening, what's changing in the world? And part of that is that how do you as leaders get up on the balcony? Because the view from up there is very different than it is down here, right? And so how do we allow ourselves to get in that balcony space so that we can take up time and look around and see how is the world changing? What's happening outside externally? But if we're only focused on what's happening and we're down on the dance floor, we won't be able to see that. But we have to do it intentionally. We have to say, okay, how are we going to get away to be able to do that balcony work? And I think that almost all of our board of directors should have an item on their agenda that helps them to do balcony work as a regular part of their work. So what if instead of having 10 items on the agenda that are all focused on the internal management of the institution, which needs to be done, you have to have good management, but you had one on there that says, where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years from now, and how do we see ourselves getting there, and what are the resources we'll need to be able to do that? And that you spend at least 1/3 of your board meeting on that particular question. How might that begin to shift the way we think and look about things? To me, that's part of what it means to be a board, is that you're looking to the future, not just managing the present. And that's a little bit more challenging for most of us, though, right? We would much rather decide if we need the copier that does 10 pages per second or the 20 pages per second. Okay. Any thoughts around any of that? Anything anybody wants to share? Okay. Phyllis Tickle. How many of you ever read anything from Phyllis Tickle? She's just a really amazing person who passed away, I think, in the last year. And one of the things that she wrote is about the cyclical nature of church. And she says that basically her thesis is that every 500 years the church goes through a rummage sale. And cleans out these old forms of spirituality and replaces it with new ones. And she doesn't mean that the previous forms become obsolete or invalid. It just means they lose their pride of place. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is to help us again, like the wandering in the wilderness, to understand that these big shifts that are happening have happened before. And she points out that this happens every 500 years. The church has this great rummage sale. And Constantine in the late century, early 5th century would be the first big one. And then the Great Schism of the 11th century. Then the Reformation of the 16th century. And now the postmodern era of the 21st century, are all these reference points of these big, huge seismic changes. And so again, we've been there. But we can't get the new holding on to the old. We have to be able to let go of some of the old. Now, as leaders in congregations, our big challenge is we have continuity and change that we have to lead, right? It's not just one, it's not just the other. So that's what I think makes it even more challenging. But to get back to Phyllis Tickle, I think again, it helps us to see that what we're experiencing is not new. We've been through this before, we will get through this before, and it's probably going to look quite different than maybe even we imagined going forward. So are there any other external factors that you can think of that are impacting the church? You know, what are some of the other, are there other things that you're experiencing or seeing? The shift around economics. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, yeah. You know, and we have this continuing growing gulf between the have and have-nots, right? And a shrinking middle class. Absolutely. Yes.
Hi, Corey Montoya, lay delegate. I was saying that a lot of millennials these days are looking towards self-help methods and also to science instead of the church. The church is no longer relevant to a lot, especially the millennials.
Okay. Okay, we'll talk more about that. Yes, Roger.
A change in our national makeup and how that affects inside and outside of the church.
Okay. That's a challenge and an opportunity, isn't it, Roger?
Yes.
Yeah.
Polarization of ideologies.
Polarization of ideologies. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Do we have any from up north? Okay. Very good. Yes. Social media, you know, the way people...
Social media in the sense that, you know, people don't talk to each other anymore. They just sit there and text each other and...
Right. Right. So the shifts in communication, huge shifts in how we communicate as a whole. Absolutely. So are we getting the sense that we're beginning to understand, you know, that we're not immune to the impact of our culture and the changes outside of us, and that we have to be aware of these and we can't ignore them? They're not going to go away, right? Okay. I think that one of the other points I wanted to raise is that I talk to a lot of pastors and pastoral leaders and board members who feel very discouraged because they put their heart and their soul into the congregation, into a particular church, and all they're now seeing is decline. They have less people, less money, less leaders to be able to do the work. And oftentimes, to be honest, some of them tell me they feel like a failure. And there's a lot of shame around, and there's shame that goes along with that. You know, and hopefully not too much blame, but oftentimes there's some of that too, if let's admit it. How did we get here? What happened? And I really feel it's important to say that the shifts that are happening outside in the world, the external ones, are not your fault. Those are not things that you can control. There are certainly some internal things that you can control, but those are not. And let's say it, we're all in this together. And so let's let go of that past stuff. Let's let go of it. Own it, say it. But I believe our leaders have been faithful. And we've struggled at places to try to be fruitful in today's world. But they've been faithful. So I think that I don't believe that they have failed us. That they have we have all done our very best, and the world is changing around us, and we just need to recognize that and own that. Does that make any sense? Yeah. I think that's really important for all of us to hold on to and remember and remind each other of. And just also a reminder that God is always ahead of us. God is always ahead of us doing a new thing, right? We're the ones that need to be running to catch up. In Scripture it says what? God says, sing a new song. Sing a new song. Nowhere in Scripture does it say sing an old song. Sorry, choir directors. But singing a new song is challenging, isn't it? Learning a new song, because you have to learn the new words, a new tune. I'm sure that there's much better ways of describing that than I just did. But the reality is we're going to stumble along with the words at the beginning, right? We're not going to get it right the first time. You keep practicing. It's almost like learning a new language. But singing a new song. And if we can all be willing to do that together. Now, Jude, we have not had a break. Should we take a 10-minute break now? Only 10. Okay, 10-minute break, and then we'll finish up with Shift Happens.
But I just want to, I'll come back and get it. I just didn't want to sit on that chair back there.
Okay, I'll get another one over here because they've got a hot microphone. There's 3 of them.
Okay. No, Toby can go to Dan. There's an AA meeting at the Royal House.
That's what they said. Was that
Yep. That would be the issue.
Read to me.
Well,
Yes, people want
You and I were supposed to be 76 degrees here.
I don't think we had 76 overnight last night. Really? Oh, I tell you, and the same thing too, when we sit in Central Hall on Sundays, and we see somebody sitting alone, because they're news, I always say, attack.
No, it was
I remember when John did, we started out like,
I'm good.
MCC in St. Petersburg.
We were
here in Gill.
They were small but mighty.
Gill. And he was, somebody came in, and you were listening to this,
I'm sorry.
I catch him, I told him, sorry,
I'll be fantastic. Thank you.
Well, anyway, means a lot.
So easy.
I tell you this, there's just so, I go to some other meetings and things like this, and people talking, well, we're spiritual, we're not religious, I just, and I said, if you come back once a week, you'll hear a lot of stuff that we're talking about in here, word for word. You know.
She was yes, with an amused expression on his
Exactly.
face.
What are they doing in this?
He looked at me and said, "You look like
Oh no, she's got an accent.
Hi, thank you for the coffee and all the stuff. Yeah, I wouldn't have the calls, but just been outside. It's freezing.
Tiny hand is frozen, as the song goes.
You got tiny hand is frozen. Kaboom. So foxtrot, isn't it?
It's a Boston rock. It's very wrong. I like it.
It's changed my mind.
They don't want somebody filming that, because they're Muslim, they're not going down.
And I can't tell them.
No, I can't do that.
Spirituality is shifted to the individual from community. And that's another big shift. So I don't need community to be able to be in touch with God.
Right.
That's a huge one. People,
But you do in order to nurture your spiritual life, and how do you persuade people who have never experienced community of value? That's the question.
You have to develop, I believe it's developing new opportunities to build spiritual community.
Because as long as I have my cell phone, I don't need mails.
You don't answer yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Busy streaming thing.
Rests a lot on that sort of knocking on the edge which comes from community life, and limits on yourself on some other. Rubbing up against people who normally wouldn't want to spend 5 minutes with is actually really good for your spirituality. And persuading people to live alongside differing opinions and experience is difficult.
Well, it's like people who do play school that kids in school. They are not exposed to different people, they're not
Ideas,
ideas, way of
different
thinking,
cultures.
different cultures. Oh,
No, we do. And it's an important.
oh, we did too.
You absolutely treasure the fact that that's a constant teaching example, because there can be just this assumption that there's one sort of thing. And I dare say, that will
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll call you.
He's really a nice guy.
All right, thank you.
I can hold something over my shoulder.
Not to the jacket.
How are you doing?
This is reform to us.
And your church?
We're in that meetings right now.
Facebook with
My husband wants us to make it a video search.
You would look to where we're at. Definitely don't have mail.
Melvin just now, you was here for I should have said your mask.
In about 2 minutes, we're going to get going again. If y'all want to come back in and take your seats.
The area's off. I don't know. I wonder if there is there a thermostat up in the
No, there is. It's a per zone up there. But all the air, I just took all the air conditioning in the sanctuary is off. So
because there's definitely right here.
So, I mean, I could put the.
Which is 10.
It's 70.
Really?
You've never heard that expression?
You led a sheltered life.
Yes, you have. That's when you should have dropped the ice. We do.
The sanctuary ordinance says that I have multiple alerts. So that's actually happened. It does show little families for some reason, but it does say it's all.
cleaning it out.
Maybe just
The more pressure I have, the more pressure. Okay, yeah.
Okay, quit having that much fun. We're going to start.
Good? Okay, great. Thank you. Everybody had a good break? Are we back gathered up north? They're ready? I thought about one other factor before I switched to the next piece that someone brought up during the coffee break. How about that? We were actually talking about church. Believe this? It was talking about the shifts in spirituality with the nuns and the nuns, that they see their spirituality as individual. And it's not something that they need a community to experience God. And so that is a huge shift for us. And then part of, what we're talking about with Clinton was, how do we build opportunities for spiritual communities in new ways that maybe feel much more open and attractive than coming to the everyday church. So what are some new ways that you can build spiritual community, and what would that look like? And you'll see, I think, a lot of different experiments in that area with different congregations. And again, that's going to be very, very important to be extremely contextual. But what you see now is very different ways of even church forming. And I know that for some traditionalists, this may send them running out the door. I'm not looking at anyone in particular as I'm saying this, but okay. So an example would be, there's a church that started at a laundromat. And that is where the people come and gather and meet. But it's attracted a new way of attracting spiritual community in a very different way, in ways that we haven't maybe even thought of or been willing to try. And so part of our challenge is letting go of our old paradigms and thoughts of what church looks like, because it could look very, very different in the future. And so how are we then, MCC, has to be open and realize that there are multiple paths to being church in today's world, not just one way. We may not be ready to experiment that far yet, but the fact is that if you have an idea and you want to be able to try to do something new and different like that, and you feel a calling for new ways to build spiritual community, we want to be supportive of that at MCC. Yes, Roger.
Crystal Cathedral started in a drive-in, but it's now a Catholic church.
Right. There's a whole story behind that one, right? A long story there. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the external factors that impact us, and now let's talk a little bit about what it means to be a church, to be a living organism, and what is the congregational life cycle? Because all churches are living organisms. There's a life cycle to them. And so oftentimes, this is another really important factor around revitalization that we often ignore or very much underestimate where we are in this particular life cycle. So can you pull that up to full picture? Great. Now, I also, again, realize you can't see it, but there's 3 pieces to this congregational life cycle. And let me just say that I will make sure that all of these slides are available to all of you I'll send them to the network leaders or whoever, Shannon. Okay, so I'll make sure everybody gets copies of these slides, and then you can have them to present at your congregation, so we'll follow up with that. So in the congregational life cycle, it basically says, at the beginning you have this, you start off as a church in this exciting period of time of growth, right? And things are kind of booming, and all the energy builds as you reach out to people and the community in mission. It's an exciting time in the church. And then you move to this period of maintenance. Now, some of this is necessary because you have to have infrastructure to be able to maintain, your ministries, right? To be able to maintain that momentum. But then, as you move into that maintenance period, the energy starts to be consumed internally, maintaining the existing congregations and ministries. Sound familiar? Okay. So we were at this beginning place. At the beginning is growth, and to move to maintenance, maintaining the existing congregation and ministries. And then it moves down into the decline, where the energy dissipates as people, money, and resources bleed out. Does that sound familiar? And what's interesting is, rather than looking at revitalization, what often happens during those periods is we work harder at what's already not working. Hello. And so then this is the place where I often hear well-meaning, well-intentioned congregational leaders say, we just need some new blood. We just need some new blood. We just need some people to fill the seats and to put their money in the plate. And I call that the Dracula philosophy of church growth. The new blood. And I can tell you, people can smell that a mile away. They can smell that a mile away. Because that's all about how can you come support the institution. Not about how can we come be a part of changing the world, right? That's a very different message. I understand the need to support the institution. I understand the needs of that. However, I don't believe that that's what attracts people to community. But too often we'll get in that mindset, don't we? So we have these different areas of the congregational life cycle, and the next here. In this particular slide, the emphasis shows that in the red, green, and blue, and it shows that the further you go down on this life cycle, of course, the further it is to come back up, isn't it? And so what you want to do is start your revitalization process when you're in that red area. You don't want to wait until you get down into that blue area, because then it is much, much harder to come back. And will take tremendous amount more energy and effort to be able to do it. And quite honestly, the chances of being able to come back become dramatically much more difficult. So in this one, we have birth, growth, stability at the top, and then decline, and death. And the way that they define each of these, the red, the green, and the blue, is if you're in the red, it's a time of redefinition. If you're in the green, then they call it a time of redevelopment, and then the blue, a time of rebirth. And what we've done with the revitalization program is that one of the first steps we do is help congregations who are interested in joining the program, and any church can join the program at any time, and it's free. At any time. But what we help you to do is the initial part is the assessment, because you have to start with the current reality, right? And so so our goal is to help you to figure out, are we in that red, are we in the green, are we in the blue? Because each one of those places will call for a very different strategy, wouldn't it? If you were going to begin to get into revitalization. And we're very, very clear, in all of our processes that one size does not fit all. As someone who's 6'6", I can assure you one size does not fit all. I was at the hotel and they had one size fits all bathrobe. You know where the belt was? Okay, where was I? Where is something important here? Okay. And so and we have different tracks, of course, for each of these areas you can be in. Now, it may be that you're in one of these areas and you're experiencing something that's very, very challenging that may be an obstacle to you really participating in this process. For example, let's just say that you've just had a major conflict. Then that major conflict has to be dealt with, and we have to learn new ways of communicating before we can then move forward in this process, correct? And so we have resources available if during that assessment period we identify those are things that you really need to address. We have a conflict transformation team to be able to help with those kind of things. You may have a building issue that has to be resolved. Your lease is up and you're going to have to move. Okay, well, let's deal with that first. Let us help you with that, and then we can begin together in this process. So we're very understanding and aware that there could be certain things that need to be addressed, and we're very willing and anxious and enthusiastic about helping you with those things. Okay? So that's the assessment period. One of the other things I want to mention before I get to the next slide, and I'm going to go into each of these circles just a little deeper, is that what we're calling for during these times of revitalization and renewal is really a little bit different style of leadership. So often we've had this traditional style of leadership where it's top down. And interestingly enough, they did a lot of research about it, and they call it the Rothage rule. And the more top-down an initiative is, the least likely it is to be successful. Now that's an important thing to remember. So as leaders, but what happens? People come up to you and they expect you to have the answers because you're the leader, right? And we almost feel like we have to have the answer. And if we don't, we feel inadequate somehow. And so here we are now in this period where we really don't know what the answers are to what's next often. It calls for new learning together. And so one of the things that we have to try to do as leaders is to not try to have the answers. The leader's role becomes to ask the questions. When they come up to Pastor Kevin and they say, Kevin, what should we do about this? And Kevin, instead of pulling a brilliant answer out of his brilliant mind, turns and says, what do you think? What do you think's behind that? How are some ways that you might think? Because and so that's a very different way of leading, isn't it? Is that intimidating to some of you? And what happens too then is that oftentimes too, some people will be disappointed in you because you don't have the answer. And so you have to learn to be okay with that. And as part of this process, what we do and when we begin is we have a meeting with all of the leadership of your church, let's say on a Friday evening before we do a Saturday workshop with the congregation. And the leaders, we have a leader's guide. And to help leaders understand how their role is different in these kinds of processes. And I can tell you the leaders have been really appreciative of understanding that kind of shift in the role, and to get all of the leaders on the same page. So we're not running around trying to find answers, but we're becoming better at asking questions and listening. That's a pretty big shift, isn't it? And the other big piece to that too is that when people look for answers, what we often want is a technical fix to an adaptive challenge. Now, let me just explain a little bit more. The technical fix is the light switch is broken. We need to call an electrician who's an expert and they know how to fix it. Okay? An adaptive challenge is people are attending less and less frequently. That's a real challenge. Whereas people used to attend church 3 or 4 times a month, that was regular attendance. For many, it's once every 6 or 8 weeks, and they call themselves a regular attendee. And that was what Reverend Pat Bumgardner at MCC New York told me. She said, my people here believe that they are regular attendees if they come once every 6 to 8 weeks. Now, same thing happened in MCC DC, Pastor Dwayne Johnson. He was like, what's happening with our attendance? Where are these people going? How have we lost them? And so Dwayne got with his associate pastor, Kathy Alexander, and they studied all of the attendance patterns for the last year. And what they came to realize was they didn't really lose any people, but people were attending much less frequently. Now, there's not a technical fix to that, folks. And what they say too is that one of the people who's written most of the books I've read most of his books, said that there are no longer any experts in church growth today. We are all practitioners in this together. And I believe there is no truer statement has ever been said. And so we in these situations where we're called into this time of new learning together, right? And so how do we then as leaders help to facilitate that new learning? One, by asking questions. Certainly by saying, hey, this is the current reality. This is real, folks. Somebody has to do that. Sometimes people don't like to hear that, but I believe that that's part of our role as a leader. And then the other is helping to create that safe space, that holding space where people can feel comfortable, can feel safe to be able to share with what's going on with them and what they're seeing, and to be able to have their voices heard. Okay? So that's just a little bit about the shifts in terms of leadership roles. Does that make sense? I know that could be a whole nother workshop, couldn't it? Okay. So let's go on with the congregational life cycle. And I got to shift here. Okay. So if you're up in the red, let's just say your church is doing really well. Things are going great. Or things are going okay. There's the time to begin to look at redefining. This period of redefinition. It says churches must redefine themselves during periods of stability. What they're saying is don't wait until you go further down on that life cycle before you start to try to come back up, because it's going to be that much harder. It says some of the key questions for leadership during this period include, what was the original vision? What has been accomplished? What is new that was not anticipated? And where do we see this ministry in 3 to 5 years from now? So you can start to see that we begin to look at, okay, here's where we are. Where do we want to be in the future? We're not waiting until we get to this period of decline. We're redefining ourselves at this moment. And again, making that shift with the board agenda can be one way to help facilitate that these kind of conversations are happening. So does that make sense there with that one? How many of you would see your congregation in this place? Yeah, in the red. In the red. Okay. Okay. And how many of you are involved in that part of redefining? Okay. Good. Good. Kevin. Yeah, absolutely.
Wait.
Because you want me to speak loudly. If I could just challenge you on something, I actually believe, quite frankly, in the 7 churches that I've served within this denomination and in the other churches that I know that struggle, your last question there is our problem. The problem is, the question is not, where do we want to see this ministry in 3 to 5 years? The question needs to be, where is God calling us to go? And I actually believe that the problem with the denomination in every congregation that I have served is that we've become so internally focused. We've closed ourselves off to what is God calling us to be. And as a result of that, we've ignored the shift in the demographics. We've ignored the shift in our neighborhoods. We've ignored the shift in what's going on with the LGBTQ community. So I would really encourage us to move beyond what we want, because church should never be about what we want.
Can we get a big hand for Kevin with that one? And Kevin, I agree with you 110%, and I just may strike out this bullet point from further PowerPoints, even though it was the author's, obviously not mine. And I want to say that because you're absolutely correct. And what and this leads me to the next one of my next points, is that what we've learned is that the traditional organizational development processes that we've used in the past that have, and oftentimes produced some very good results, are no longer producing the results that we have hoped and planned for. And so, what would the traditional organizational planning process would be, you would bring somebody in from the outside and they would come spend a Saturday with you, and you would do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you would do that kind of stuff in the morning, and then in the afternoon, you would do your mission, vision, and values. And then out of that, you would build a strategic plan. And so Reverend Elder Don Eastman even told me, he said, Tony, we're not getting the results that we used to from these processes. And to me, one of the points, so I said, if it's not working, let's do something different. How about let's try something new? What if we were to shift from decision-making to discernment? What if we as a communities, and honestly, I'm not saying that the people that spent the one day there weren't prayerful and didn't, and the Spirit couldn't move. I'm just saying that there is a difference between a microwave process and a crock pot process. And I believe that the spiritual discernment process is what we are called to as communities of faith. That we practice spiritual disciplines, and that spiritually discerning together, and our starting point, and the starting point in the old organizational development models was exactly how Kevin pointed out, which is this statement here. What do we want? What do we want? What do we think we need? And the new spiritual discernment processes that we're working with and utilizing in the revitalization, we start with God. We start with the God question. What is God up to in the world, and how can we be a part of it? Because we want to, right? That's very different, isn't it, than starting with what do we want? And it's been really interesting to watch how congregations have approached this question in terms of spiritual discernment. One of the ways that we've done this is I've seen as pastors have taken a business-sized card and put that question about what is God up to in the world and how are we going to be a part of it. And then they put a different, so they put that on the front of the card, and then on the back they put a time that everyone in that congregation is going to pray about that question every day. And so then, you have this ongoing process of spiritual discernment, not only individually, but as communal. It's communal, right? And then Terry Miller, who's up north there, did some of this work with her congregation, and they had a bulletin board where people were able to come in and see what they think God is up to in the world, and they could bring articles and pictures and different things like that, so that every week when people came in, they could see, ooh, what's new up there? What's God up to in the world? And then she also had some very creative people in her congregation that responded to the question with a painting and another one with a poem. And so the woman got up and she explained what she thought God was up to in the world through this painting that she had done. And it was so powerful. It was so amazing. And so every week you could have somebody come up into the pulpit and talk about what is God up to in the world. And that way, in keeping that spiritual discernment and keeping those processes going together and not limiting people to narrative, right? Because we have a lot of creative people in MCC. So there's different ways to be able to express that. So thank you, Kevin, for allowing me to bring in that segue. Okay. So if you're a little further down on the life cycle, in that green area, it says churches must redevelop themselves during decline, and leadership must recognize that new information will not reverse decline, just new information alone. What that means is that there's new learning required, not just new information. So I guess you could, parse that in different ways. But what I think it's really saying is the technical fix isn't going to be the answer. That's how I read that statement. Only new and different purpose and direction can reverse decline. Now, I'm not sure that you have to have a different purpose. I could disagree with the author here a little bit. I think that what's important today is that you're ultimately really clear about your purpose. You have to be so clear about it. And how many of you are clear about your mission and your purpose of your congregation? So if you have that clarity, then what you can do is you just need to be really flexible about your strategy as to how you achieve that mission, right? And how you achieve that purpose. Flexible with strategy, clear and hold fast with your purpose. Excuse me a minute. So it does say that that any changes there, of course, are going to be experienced by the congregation as significant change. And every time there's a change, some people feel a sense of loss, right? So you have to also understand and recognize that those dynamics are going to be present. As you begin to change and you're doing this redevelopment work, you're going to have to let go of some old to get the new. And there will be people that will experience that as loss. And so to understand that, those are going to be part of the dynamics of change, they're going to be present, and to be aware of them. And it says that, this also calls for having skilled and differentiated leadership. Differentiated leadership doesn't take it personally when somebody gets angry because there's a change. And that's not often easy for us to do, especially people who are very high in mercy, like a lot of us are. We want to fix everything. We want to make everything right. But you can't go through this change and expect that some people won't get upset and that there's not going to be some feeling that people have a sense of loss. One of the little things that I read in a book somewhere that I never forgot was there was a pastor who kept a jar of Q-tips on his desk. And Q-tips stands for quit taking it personally. That's a good one, huh? Quit taking it personally. And you have to be able to do that. That's part of being self-differentiated, is that you don't take these things personally as you're going through these periods of change and transition. Okay? Easier said than done. All right, next one here. Churches must realize that rebirth is the only option during serious decline. This is really important. Congregations typically deny, underestimate, and then under-respond to serious decline. It's hard for us to acknowledge where we really are. And I think it's even more difficult for churches that were larger to recognize where they are in this, in this new place. And I watch oftentimes where churches that were 200 that are now 76 try to continue to operate like they were 200 and wondering why it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so underestimating it, and we do this with ourselves too. It's like, you know what? I don't feel my age, right? Right? I mean, how many people say that? Yeah. But then all of a sudden, when a middle-aged person starts calling me sir, I said, is there something I'm missing in the mirror here? But it's human. It's human. I think it's our tendency to underestimate those kind of things, isn't it? And we often don't want to admit that it's gotten that far. But that's real. And that's, again, part of that leader's role is helping to name that current reality. Because that's where you have to start from, even when it's hard to hear. So our assessment process oftentimes is helping people to come to grips with that current reality and say, you know what, I know you think you're up here, but this is what all the data, this is what all of the research, this is all of the information says you're here. And so this, rebirth requires radical change. Rebirth requires, a completely new shift in thinking. And then resurrection only follows death. And that's the harder part, isn't it? It's not that so much often as the learning something new, it's letting go of the old. And there's so many ways that that's applicable to us. Particularly when people become invested in individual ministries. And so then, that they want to start it, and it's been theirs for 20 years, and so they don't want to let go of it. And the fact is that the world has changed. And so it has to become a new way. So oftentimes we have to look at ourselves in these processes and say, how am I either an obstacle to this, or how am I helping us to move forward to be part of that new thing that God is doing? It's not that, we don't appreciate, it's not that do not appreciate very much all that they've done for all those years, but times you have to take a step and look back at it. And to go back to purpose, how is each of these different individual ministries contributing to the whole of our purpose? And if you're not clear about your purpose, then what is your touchstone for saying yes and saying no? Then it becomes a popularity thing or the squeakiest wheel as to what you do and don't do, right? And then all of a sudden you've got 15 different ministries going that nobody can remember quite why they started, but we got to keep doing them because we did them before. And do you know the churches that are most guilty of this, or most susceptible, I should say, to this kind of thing, are the smaller churches. The smaller churches, the more apt this is about to happen. Because, an example, in a church of 40, 50 people, Mary Sue comes in and says, my sister Linda is moving in with us, and she's got 3 kids. We have to start a Sunday school. May make sense, maybe not, but you can see the picture. Next time somebody else comes in and says, my partner's depressed. We need to start a depression support group. And nobody can say no. Because it's not clearly about what is our purpose and how are we going to get there. Now, those things may fit into that. But that's a very different process of just saying, okay, we'll do that because so-and-so said that it needs to be done, than saying, how does that help us fulfill our purpose? And then how do we align our resources around that? Does that make sense? Okay. And when we talk about, resurrection follows death, isn't that our faith journey? Isn't that what we believe? And so why are we so afraid oftentimes? It's fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown. Okay. So I want to ask you all a question. When you think about these different life cycles, and I want you to take a few minutes and just talk with the people around you, where do you see your congregation in these life cycles, and what would be, and anything in that part of the presentation around life cycles that spoke to you and your current situation at your congregation? So just kind of maybe in small groups, 4 or 5 with the people around you, and take about 5 minutes for that, okay?
Join you guys.
How's it going?
And sometimes it is about what was the break in time between? Back then, no, some of them were 7 years. start new relationships, new friendships. Not only do we make them feel like they have friends in our where the English language barrier, almost none of that speaks. But also to make church. It's been a couple of years now. And there are majority of percentage of the costs of the church. We do, we speak with friends, which I think there's interaction between the leadership. There's interaction, cross-pollination, in terms of the stuff being done, which they receive, and the fact that their work allows our work to continue, but not sort of reward us. Yes, absolutely. I was comparing this to my business about listening to what the customer wants. Right, what we're doing is listening to our potential customers and changing and adding things that people want and eliminating things that people aren't asking for and helping people discover some old things which improve consistently. Right. And it's only when you're approaching skills that you have the time, resources, and the energy to do that. It's not about failing yourself, you know? Honestly, the vast majority of people didn't know what it was beforehand. If you'd asked them whether you were to like, you couldn't read something about it. It's only when they experience it, and it's new to experience it, they say, oh, that's true. We don't know that until it's happened. And therefore, we ask these questions about when they are so visceral. They are. I'm a bit tickled. I'm coming down to ask people, they might not be well, with this programming thing, we got a team of people together and asked them, what kind of things would you like to see? What are spiritual social came up with this whole it's like board games every other Friday night in Rome. It's like the most successful thing. There's so many people who come to this. Just have a blast. Who would have thought? Well, novelty is not necessarily a recommendation.
More minutes, a couple more minutes, okay? Revitalization, network gathering.
A couple things come to mind. I sat for a few years with Clement, and I had no community. And I think that, well, we need to have very clear and stick to it. So that when things that folks were in risk management, how to take things into that case. And you realize the insurance was so that's the place that we focus
Okay, I'm going to see if we can come back together here. It's a large group. Okay, we coming back together?
I've been set up.
Yeah? Okay. Good, good, good. Looks like there was some excellent conversation going on. And maybe just hear a little bit about what you were talking about. What were some of the points, the things that came up in your conversation? Anyone like to volunteer?
Well, we were talking about coming up the curve to stability and being creative about change and introducing new thoughts, and being mindful about saying no, keeping the vision and mission in mind, and using that as a filter for suggestions of change and growth, and how important that is. And how sometimes suggestions that we might think of intellectually as being, what? How is that going to work? Can be hugely successful. And I was thinking of an example where one of the things, somebody brought an idea up of having like a board game night a couple times a month. And I was thinking, oh, what a dumb idea. No one's going to go to this. It's so fun and so great. And so many new people come to it just to hang out together.
Right.
So.
Thank you, Beth. And isn't that, what they say about churches is the couple statements that will end up kill us is that we've never done it that way before, or we tried it once, so we'll never do that again. Right? How do we get it to that place that we try, we're so afraid that we're going to try something and it doesn't work. Well, so what? Let's try something, and if it doesn't work, let's try that. Then we learned something, right? Rather than just seeing it as a failure, seeing it as was an opportunity we took to learn something. We know that doesn't work, so let's try it another way.
My senior deacon, Jim Barr, always pressed it home to me that trying something is not trying it even a few times. You have to give it consistency so that people know to expect it. And really, you only know after a year whether it's something to be continued or not. And certainly with the Tea and Sympathy, that developed a permanency, the Wednesday afternoon social. And now if I tried to stop that, I would have big problems. Yeah, absolutely. So that doggedness, I would not have identified myself. But he was insistent. He turned out to be absolutely right on that. Yeah. It may seem to be failing, but stick with it. And you will only be able to say whether it was a success or not after you've done it for a good few months.
Right. So you want to make sure you give some time to see if it really works or not before you evaluate it. And I think that's important. I guess what I'm also looking at is how do we make a culture shift in our congregations where it's okay to try something and it not work. And we don't turn around and start looking for who to blame, but rather we celebrate it as in learning something and move on. Because if the world is rapidly changing and God is always up to something new, then we're going to have to continually be in the process of experimenting. And you can't have experiments without some of them not working. And you know how WD-40 got its name? Because they tried 40 times before they got the formula right. So what if we were willing, because we were so passionate and feel so called by God to do something, that we were willing to try 40 different ways before we got it right? I think that would be pretty amazing. Yes, sir.
I work in mental health, and one of the things I teach the people that I am in therapy with is that it takes a minimum of 21 days to establish a new habit. How often do we try something new and we give it one try, 1 week? Oh, that's Esther, we're not going to do it again. We're really trying.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I think another thing that we talked about was the importance of listening to the community around us. I feel very challenged to go out and listen, just talk to people and listen to them, and so that's what really spoke to me in the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that importance of listening. Yeah. Okay.
Do you have someone from Sacramento who'd like to say something?
Sure. I just keep wondering who this guy with gray hair is on the screen.
Dave, can you bring in Sacramento?
You're asking them something?
You're asking me?
Oh.
Do you have something you would like to say something?
You're not unmuted.
Now go. Okay. Okay. So I just want to say hi. I'm Scotty from Redwood Empire up here in Northern California. I just wanted to say when we were talking in our group over here, and I wanted to share that one of the things that what I was saying was that we aren't always so much tired as we are uninspired, and that sometimes I think that, like, I would love to have a worship services, for example, 30 minutes long, no bulletin, you know, because we think in terms of it's a person who uses Twitter a lot, 440 characters. So how is Jesus in 140 characters? How in the Twitter mind where everything connects to something else and it was a constantly dynamically moving thing, how do we make our services, how do we break that open where we're suddenly looking at, how do we talk about Jesus in this long, couple hashtags, push send, read the next one, scroll down. Anyway, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we back here, or we do? We're back here, okay. Okay, any other comments here? Any other things that came up in your discussions? Was that helpful? So just to, parting to understand too is that, revitalization is for everyone. And so the first, part of this, we've talked about all of the external factors and the way the world's changing, the way that we need to be evolving also. And then we look at the congregational life cycle. And so, that's part of the way a living thing is that happens. And again, it's being aware of it. Not being around to blame and shame, but hey, this is where we are, right? And help us to understand if we understand where we are, then we can understand where we need to go. And again, vibrancy and vibrant churches can be any size. It doesn't matter if it's 10 people or 150 people or 1,000 people. And I know that in the past, MCC, we spent a lot of time around size theory in churches. And we got deep into that. And we talked about the family size, the pastoral size, the corporate size, et cetera. And I still believe that those are good paradigms for understanding how we function at a particular size. But I think what happened inadvertently, and maybe not intentionally, was that people saw that as a ladder that needed to be climbed rather than as a way of understanding how we operate in different ways. And so, my encouragement is too that we recognize that vibrant churches come in all shapes and all sizes. All right? Yay. All right, I'm going to do one more slide. Did they get copies of the slides, Jude?
Yes, they did. They're putting them up.
Oh, wonderful. They were having a little problem seeing, any detail in the pictures. And so that probably was a little bit more challenging for them. So thank you, Jude, for correcting that. Now, no, we don't want to go to this slide. I want to go back. There you go. If you could just keep that up in the big way. One of the things that I often see, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to break for lunch, is that we feel as though we have to get everybody on board before we can start to do something. Well, you know what? They're not for it, so we can't do it. Well, if you wait until you get everybody on board, you will always be waiting. It's not going to happen. And so part of this is to understand, don't beat yourselves up over this, because that's the way it is. Recognize and accept this. And this Rogers Innovation Adoption Curve really helped me in understanding this. And it almost felt like a relief, because I was like, why won't those people, why don't they understand the importance of this and get on board? And all they want to do is sit in the back with their arms crossed and say no. Right? But if you're waiting for them to come along before you start, you're never going to get started. And so in this one, in that small little bright green portion on the left, those are the innovators. And that's usually about 2.5% of your congregation or your community. That's a very small percentage. Those are the people that somebody says, I got a new restaurant, let's go. I've heard about a new restaurant. They're the ones that are ready to jump on any new idea and, hey, let's give it a try. That sounds exciting. And then, so you want to find those people if you're going to start a new process like around revitalization, right? It's important to have some of those kind of people on your team, on board, to be able to just encourage each other even, right? So then the next portion is the early adopters, and that's 13.5%. And so you put that together, that's still only 15%. But those early adopters will be people that will come on board quickly and help you to move things forward. So if you can identify people, the innovators and those early adopters, then you should be on your way. You don't want to wait for the rest. And then you have these big sections. In that orange is the early majority. And those are the people that will come along once they see other people coming along. And that's a pretty big section. And then in the pink section, you have the late majority, which is around 34%. And they're a little slower to come along. They're like, well, we got to wait and see. I'm not sure. And then at the red place is the laggards, which is, if I can read this, 16%. These are the ones that sit in the back that will fold their arms and say no. And and every congregation has the people that are resistant to change. That's just the way it is. And so accepting that and understanding that, and not beat yourself up because everybody didn't get on board right away. Does that make sense? Oh, yes. Yeah. So helping ourselves just to give ourselves permission to say no and to accept that not everyone's going to be excited about it at the same time. But it doesn't mean you don't do it, because your purpose is too important. And as I said at the very beginning, our world needs these progressive voices of faith leading our world in acts of justice and compassion. Okay, so is that helpful at all to look at that early adopter, look at that adoption? I just thought it was a relief. You know, I was like, so oftentimes I try so hard to try to get everybody on board, and then I realized, you know, that's really a lesson in futility. All right, I think we are right at lunchtime, Jude.
Thank you very much. Would you like to praise for lunch? You praise?
I have an announcement about lunch. So lunch, I was told by the late delegates and that lunch will be downstairs, so just go out these double doors. Around the corner, the street right here is Rodman. About 3/4 of the way down, the double doors into the kitchen, and all the food is ready to be served already.
Thank you, Corey.
There is an elevator. People are mobility challenged.
Now I'm going to ask Pastor Kevin to.
Oh, I prayed you open.
Oh, prayed you. Oh, that's right. I did. Yes.
You were describing a church, I forget which church, but you said they hired a listener.
Yes.
But you also said that they stopped all charity works, and I found that the dichotomy for a church. What did you mean?
Well, she asked about, you know, they said they stopped charity. They didn't stop them forever, but they stopped everything they were doing because part of it was an example would be they had an after-school program where they were invested a lot of money into building a gym, trying to get, you know, young adults into these after-school programs and help to try to get them off the street in the gangs. And after a period of time, when they went back and they looked at the statistics and things, that had not had any impact. It had not really changed the culture in that community. And so rather than keep doing something because we think it's the right thing to do and because it feels good for us to do it, let's try to develop something that's new and effective. And by doing that, let's go out and listen to the community rather than assume we have the answers as to what they need. So it doesn't mean, I don't think they've had a change of heart. I think it's just how can we be more effective in the ways that we reach out and help people. Is that helpful? Okay, thank you. All right, so now Robert from MCC Las Vegas is going to bless our food and our time together.
My introduction as the first pastorate, right? You'll pray with me. Gracious and loving God, God, we come before you. God, I give you thanks just for this opportunity to gather and to meet, and be it through social media, be it in person. God, as we prepare to eat and to refuel, if you will, God, I ask that you bless this food. Bless it to the nourishment of our bodies. God, bless the hands that provided these foods items for us. God, we ask that you bring us back as we prepare for the afternoon. Allow our minds to be clear, to hear what you may be calling us as a church, as churches, as MCC. God, we ask this in your many and holy names. Amen.